In 2017, I was invited to address the 35th Annual Salmonid Restoration Conference at the University of California. I shared my perspective on managing landscape cumulative effects, particularly with reference to salmon and salmonids, some lessons that I had learned through my work in Canada. I look at the interactions of people, the environment, and economy, because I know that the knowledge that's in there is, that's where we're going to find the answers to unlock prosperity while caring for the earth. Now, this was a major event, 4 days, field tours, workshops, 9 sessions. Hey, I'm a systems ecologist, so this is like right up my alley. And Karen, my wife and business partner, was able to join me for the full event. Lucky her. And I really, I admired Karen's stamina as we sat there for 4 days and enjoyed a tsunami of PowerPoints, Cartesian graphs, regressions, confidence intervals. Oh, great stuff. And afterwards, we got a chance to decompress in the magnificent redwoods of the Muir Woods National Monument, just outside of San Francisco. And during that, Karen shared with me how impressed she was. What happened here? We went dark. Oh, I love live. Anyways, it all just went black. I thought we had a blackout, but we're good. So anyways, Karen shared with me how impressed she was with all of these people so committed to helping the salmon and their deep, deep knowledge with all the way down to the finest level of things and details. But she was also sharing with me how hard it was for them to be able to share that with people who aren't immersed in the science. So many graphs and so many details. And I just thought, when I got my scientific training, we touched on public relations, but all of my communications training was about how to present my findings so they would pass the scrutiny of a peer review. And yet I remember taking kids out to the forest in National Forestry Week and sharing stories about cool stuff like banana slugs and detritus, and just seeing them get so excited about that and wanting more details. And it was clear, like the power of story to be able to inspire and motivate. It connects us. It connects things, time, energy. So through my work with Bo and Dawn Eason, I've had the privilege of working with one of the story greats of our time, Mary Kincaid, our guest today. Mary has helped me open my eyes about how to use story in many ways, but one of the most powerful for me has been aligning my purpose with my action, to be able to connect people, you and I, right? And focus our collective energy for a desired cumulative effect. So I'm really excited to say Mary Kincaid is joining us today here on the CFX, The Connection of Things. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Barry. Great to be here.
Wow, it's fantastic to have you here. I've looked forward to this for a long, long time. I've just had the benefit of getting to know you, and I'm excited that other people are going to get to now too as well.
Thank you.
Mary, tell us a little about you and how you've been exploring story as a connector.
Yeah, well, my relationship to story began when I was a little girl. I started to read very young. I'm a voracious reader. And when I was younger, I devoured Archie comic books. I devoured Nancy Drew books. And I saw early on that there were patterns in storytelling. There were things that occurred in a certain particular way over and over. And I think I just sort of took them in by osmosis because of how much reading I've done. And then as I got older, of course, I've just been continuing to explore story in all of its myriad forms, through dance, through songwriting, through screenwriting, poetry, art, pretty much every way I can examine, every angle I can examine story from, I feel this desire to explore it.
Oh, so much. There's so much to talk about. Just something just before we get to the intro music, you just brought this back for me in memory. My mom was an English teacher, high school English teacher, and trying to motivate high schoolers to do poetry, challenging. But she found it through song, and we're going to talk more about song
Mm-hmm.
today too, and you do that. But yeah, that's how she found a way to connect with the students, and they realized that the hard, heavy rock that they were really interested in was just really good poetry.
Yeah, isn't that true? And story is truly the best way the quickest, fastest way to trust and connection with any audience, whether it's school kids or it's scientists or it's politicians or it's the general public. Story is the fastest way to trust and connection with any audience.
I'm going to go to the music because we're going to just get this show rolling.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. I love the blues, Mary. Absolutely love it. CFX is an acronym. It's my acronym for cumulative effects. And I created the show for everybody. Okay, try again, Mary. See if we can hear you again.
Oh.
They say faintly.
Testing.
Yeah,
testing,
okay.
testing.
I hear you nice and loud.
Are we good?
Yeah, hopefully that's better.
Good.
Thank you, FSD28, whoever you are. Anyways, so it's about connection, and it's supposed to be not just Mary and I, but the others. So we've already accomplished that. Now, Mary, systems are made up of parts.
Mm-hmm.
The interconnection of these parts creates synergy, and that ultimately emerges as a system outcome. And system outcomes are unique to a system. The parts can't produce it. And, one of the best examples, it's an easy one, is if you've got a flat tire on your car. You're not going to be moving very fast, if at all, because that part isn't working. So the system outcome of the car, it's not going to happen. So you told me that stories are like this. You said they were fractal in nature. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So in terms of a system and parts, something that just occurred to me as you were talking about that is, for a good story to be received by an audience or someone on the receiving end of it, there are parts to a story, right? There's plot, there's characters, there's theme, there's setting, there's all these different elements that go into a story, and they work together to create the end result that's received by the audience from that story. So I think that speaks a little bit to what you were just talking about. In terms of the fractal nature of stories, it's interesting. I was out walking in a park that's near my house just yesterday. And of course, I live in Cleveland now, so it's, winter, almost officially winter. And all the leaves are off the trees. And, it was a beautiful sunny day yesterday. The sky was that gorgeous California blue that I'm missing so much. And of course, you can see all the branches of these huge trees against the blue sky. And it's so beautiful. And you see a huge trunk, and then you see the bigger branches, and then each of the bigger branches has the smaller branches, and the smaller branches have the even tinier branches, and the tinier branches have the even tinier little twig branches at the very end. And that's what we mean by fractal, right? We see it in nature all the time. And I think of stories as being fractal in nature as well, because if you take a screenplay, for instance, and you break down a screenplay, you end up with 3 acts. Each one of those acts is divided into scenes. Each one of those scenes is divided into beats. Each one of the beats is divided into lines. Each one of the lines is divided into words. And so you have that same sort of nature built into stories. And when you look at stories as a whole, right, as a bunch of stories, I always picture it as like Russian nesting dolls is another example that I always keep in my head. Because if I think about my personal story and everything that occurs in my life and all the stories that are going on in my life, those stories are interacting with the other members of my family. And the other members of my family, all of our stories together are contributing to the story of the town that we live in, which contributes to the story of the city we live in, which contributes to the story of our state, our country. Our, if we go from the US, it then becomes North America's story. Then it becomes the Western Hemisphere story, which becomes the world's story, which becomes the universe's story. And I've heard from science that there's multiple universes. So it just keeps going and expanding. And
yet it's connected.
Yeah, it's still connected. Exactly. So it's sort of universal and individual at the same time. And I find that really interesting and fascinating.
And you were talking about the butterfly effect too.
Yeah. We've heard of this butterfly effect, a butterfly flaps its wings in Texas and the weather changes in China kind of idea because of the way that, things ripple out through these kinds of systems. And I think about that in the same fashion with story, because my story, we always have these sort of choice points in stories, right? Where the character can choose A or B, right? Like we love those stories where there's two paths, and the bigger division between the two paths and the more that's at stake for the character between choosing path A or path B, it really increases the drama of the story. And certainly all of us in our own lives at some point have faced those sort of conundrum situations of like, what am I going to do? Take path A or path B? And that choice impacts our lives, but it also impacts other people's lives around us. And that ripples out into the community, into how we respond as a nation, how we respond as a country and as a people. And I think we're seeing that now more than ever within the culture with what's happening as we try to deal with this COVID pandemic.
Yeah, and if we think of this in a sciencey way, the ripple, the movement of that energy can only happen through the connection. So that's critical. And I'm just going to throw up a video that I'll put the link to this on for Wikipedia, and you can see here, this is the butterfly effect illustrated with a pendulum. Now there's 6 pendulums here, and they were all started exactly the same by a person, but because it was started by a person, there's small little differences. And so they all basically started at the beginning, but with small little differences, and they're exactly the same pendulum. This is just video of the same thing done 6 times. And you can see now, we're only 15 or 20 seconds into this, how wildly different each of these pendulums are going. And so this ripple effect, Mary, it's not linear. It's so dynamic. And so just the smallest little change, like it occurs to me that people say, oh, my vote doesn't matter because I'm just one vote. And yet, wow, isn't that proof in the pudding that it really does matter?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, every choice we make is an important choice. I've always been fascinated, because of all the reading I've done too, I've always been fascinated with this intersection of fate and free will, right? Like how much is destined and how much is really determined by our choices and our actions. And I think there's an intersection point there. And it's one of the things that I'm constantly exploring is like where that balance is. And I think that's sort of what we're speaking to here as well. We do have opportunities to make choices in life, and they do have impact on other people. One of the other things I often talk about with this is this idea that, my personal story is that I became pregnant at a very young age, at 19. And I had to make a choice if I was going to have the child or not have the child. And in a nutshell, when it came right down to it, I was raised in a very Catholic family. There's a whole bunch of other drama related to a doctor with it and everything else. But it came down to this idea that I said to myself, I know how to play the role of a wife and mother, but I don't know how to play the role of a girl who had an abortion. And I just sort of like was projecting out this character living her life beyond that decision point and choosing a role for myself. And I felt like one of those roles I could step into and play much more easily than the other one. And so I've always sort of had this idea of us playing roles in our lives and understanding that while we're the protagonist of our own story, we are the other characters in stories in relationship to other people. So even though I'm the protagonist of my own story, today I could be the villain in somebody else's story. If I go to a concert and I'm, watching my favorite person on stage, I'm like a background player potentially in that story, right? I'm a background player in their story that day. But we take on all these different roles in other people's stories all the time. And we're not even really conscious of it and aware of it. But on reflection, we can sometimes see and reflect back on our own stories and see how we played a role in other people's stories as well. And the responsibility that we have with that.
That's so vivid. I thank you for sharing that. It's just it really brings it home. Like when it's so easy to get sort of thinking, it's all about me, and everything. We see that a lot, and I'm not maybe that's the ego in us, but that this is how collective action happens, because one person takes a choice and others choose to also take that choice. And then it becomes very powerful.
Well, and understanding that, today I might go, let's say I'm going and I'm waiting at a bus stop and I'm just waiting for a bus and someone else comes along and sits by me and they're waiting for the bus. And I happen to say something to that person, just being friendly, don't know them. I might just be making conversation and being friendly and go on the bus and go on my way and get to my job or do whatever it is I'm doing, and not think about how when that person tells their life story could say, I was on my way to go jump off a bridge, but this person sat next to me at the bus stop and I changed my mind. We don't know the impact that we are having on other people's stories all the time.
Wow. Yeah, that's a deep level. We're going to move into the Forest of Whispering Speakers and talk a little bit about how lyrics can also influence so many people that way, touch their stories. Wow, music and lyrics are really powerful. So I'm just going to play my little country opening to that because, well, it's sort of a country bluesy thing in honor to one of my favorite musicians, Mr. Gord Downie. Okay, so yeah, for those who haven't joined the show before, Forest of Whispering Speakers is a line out of a tragically hip song written by Gord Downie. And I think it speaks so deeply to this connected message that artists are giving to the world constantly. And that I think that scientists should be paying more attention to. I think it goes the other way easier. Probably what Western contemporary science at least needs to do is listen a little bit more. So let's talk about lyrics. Mary writes lyrics among all the different ways that she creates story. Lyrics is one. You can check those out at Mary Kincaid Songs. Mary, I'm going to put your page on here so people can see that. And maybe you can just tell us, we were talking about this song called Life is Perfect. Can you tell us a little bit about that song, maybe what it means to you and how it relates to cumulative effects?
Yeah, I mean, in relation to what we were just talking about, Life is Perfect was a song that was a collaborative effort. It was myself and three other songwriters, Kevin Fisher, Liam Wayne, and Nico Collins. And it was actually written with a deadline. We only had a short amount of time to work together. And very apropos, the song that came out of that session that started off quite messy ended up with a song. And the song that came out of it was a song called Life is Perfect. And the chorus lines are, life is perfect, a perfect mess. And
Ah,
that's one of the lines in the chorus. So, I often think about this, like life it is this perfect thing. And if you think about it on a really grand scale of the earth kind of just being out there in the universe, floating through space, like everything is always in sort of harmony to keep everything balanced on some grand global macro level, no matter
yeah,
how messy our lives seem. On
yeah.
some grand macro level, it's all perfect. The world's still spinning. It's still spinning through space. And
Yeah,
the
I've talked about this book before. Gunderson and Halling wrote a book called Panarchy, and it talks about organized chaos.
mm,
And it's it's pretty heavy. But the more I learn about, I think about physics and then about meaningful time and space, I think that that's partly where what how you're saying it's perfect. It might just be in a different time frame, and we're
mm,
just getting such a small snapshot of something that it seems chaotic, but it's all part of that big ripple, right?
mhm.
And yeah, I mean that's the way these systems work. It's there's randomness that does happen, I believe, but I think it is all part of a grander, um, I don't know, destiny. Is
Mhm.
that the right word?
Mhm.
You're really stretching me out of my comfort zone. You always do this, Mary. So I'm way out of it.
Yeah, the bridge of this song too. The bridge is I'm trying to remember the lyrics. Broken pieces fit together. Oh, I'm forgetting the second line now. Broken pieces fit together. Oh, so slowly we get better.
Yeah, right.
And again, like kind of very, very aligned with what's going on right now, right? Like I think a lot of people are feeling a little bit broken with everything going on in the world, with the struggles everyone's having. Um, but slowly, we will find our way through this. Science is leading us through this.
Yeah, science and people and passion and desire and this is a nice way to round out the segment on the Forest of Whispering Speakers because it comes from a song that is for a good life you might have to weaken.
Mm,
And there was an old saying that for a good life you have to be strong. You have to hold on to your convictions. And what Gord was writing about, I believe, was that um, sometimes in order to grow or to move forward, you have to weaken a little bit on your preconceived notions and accept some other ideas or be willing to explore. So
mm,
I'm doing a lot of exploring today.
absolutely.
All right, let's move to this next piece because I you had we talked about this before about sort of the physics of this thing.
Mm,
Um, that it feels like on many levels, story is actually the movement of energy.
yeah.
Um, can you tell us about that?
I call it story energetics. I mean, I do absolutely feel an energy with story. And certainly when I'm in front of live audiences, you can feel that palpable energy that's being exchanged between the
Yeah.
audience and the person on stage. I think all artists feel this when they're performing. Um, and I don't know, I've just always found it interesting to sort of look at science and math as it relates to story, because story is always like it's words, right? It's sort of that right side of the brain. But creativity and imagination is the right side of the brain, but um, there's also the left side of the brain, which is the very rational side, right? The linear side, the side that deals with numbers and facts and things like that. And actually, I think one of the reasons why I'm as good as I am at my job is because I have a very strong left brain. I started my career as a CPA, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Loved math, loved science, but I also have this sort of creative artistic side. And there's something about the balance of the two that leads to really great storytelling. Um,
I get that. I get that because in my work in system dynamics, like there's the necessities of the math and the algorithms and all that, but it's also when when you have an aptitude for that, you also see patterns.
mhm.
And then that's what I've seen you do, Mary, is you taken those patterns and pulled them together into themes, and then that becomes powerful in a different creative way.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting to me. And it's funny because, when I think about the hero's journey, which is what everybody sort of comes back to for storytelling, Joseph Campbell did such amazing work with his hero's journey. And it's sort of all over now. It's talked about in all business circles, marketing circles. Most people are familiar with the concept, and you can certainly Google it and you'll find the diagrams online in, 100 million places. But what I think about the hero's journey is it's sort of this circle, right, that takes you on a journey. And you end up coming back where you started from, but you're always on a higher level. So it's this upward progression. And the way I've always thought about it is it seems like it's this connector again that we can use in the sense that if you're a scientist, that sort of upward motion is what we refer to as evolution. And if you're a psychologist, that upward motion is what they talk about when they talk about self-actualization. And if you're a yogi, that upward motion is what they talk about when they talk about ascension. But we're all sort of talking about this same journey that we as human beings are on. And we're just looking at it from these different perspectives, but we're really all talking about the same thing in just different languages.
Wow.
And so I feel like story in many ways, it is what allows the different languages of science and psychology and mathematics and literature and all these different pieces to kind of sort of find a commonality that the culture can respond to. And that's why I think, especially now, like with all of the numbers and things, I always tell my clients, numbers have to be contextualized, right? They have to be given meaning to an audience. And certainly someone who understands the numbers like you do doesn't need that potentially, but to a different audience, when you're extending your work into a different audience, it's so important to contextualize the numbers for them and give the numbers meaning. And the way we give them meaning is through story.
Yeah, and it helps me too, actually. I mean, I see like in the scenario planning I do, they're all stories. Mm-hmm. They're all possible futures that we imagine and then play out. And the thing that I'm always saying as a systems ecologist is that you have to look at things holistically. And there's a lot of different moving parts, and you can't just pluck one out and look at it in isolation. Mm-hmm. And so the story is a way that, I mean, we've been wired for generations to think this way, to bring it all together, mm-hmm. to take down the complexity to something that is a relatable for a human. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see it as being very powerful, and I have the privilege of working with a number of Indigenous communities, and I've been learning, the power of how knowledge was shared orally just through story, thousands and thousands of years, perhaps in a more powerful way than the written word even. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're at my favorite point in the show where I get to terrorize the guest with my rapid fire questions. So, and I also get to wear my glasses because it's getting harder and harder for me to see. And it's a good excuse because I have to read them from this little book. So this is real good. I have no dangerous questions in here, Mary, so you can relax a little bit. And it's just intended to be sort of, quick answer, your first thought, so we can get to know Mary a little bit differently. And it's always lots of fun. Always have lots of laughs. All right. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. You can do this. Mary, do you have a favorite number?
3.
3. Mm-hmm. Favorite color?
Black.
Wow. Cool. I've not heard that one.
No, not usually.
Do you write in silence or do you have music?
Oh, silence.
When you were a kid, what was one of your favorite books?
I loved the Nancy Drew books.
Do you wake up with an alarm or just when you wake up?
No, when I wake up.
That's so cool. Karen and I decided to do that 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. I've never been late. Oh. And boy, it's nice not to get jolted out of your bed.
It is the best.
I highly encourage people to try that. Just set your alarm like 10 minutes late for a backup, but you won't need it. Mary, what's something in your cupboard or your fridge that's running out?
Ooh, I'm sorry, that froze. That's what?
Oh, what's something in your cupboard or fridge that's running out that you need to replenish?
Um, Not sure. I'll say milk.
Okay. I have no milk, actually. I better get some too. Do you prefer ice in your water or just straight up?
Straight up.
Pen, pencil, or keyboard?
Pen.
Stage or camera?
Stage.
What single piece of advice would you give an aspiring writer?
Write every day.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's hard to do, though. Hard to do. I'm trying to do that one. What's something outside of writing and stories that you'd like to do?
That I'd like to do that I haven't done yet?
Yeah, something that's not related to that.
I'd like to learn like Qigong or Tai Chi.
Oh, cool. It's maybe bringing some discipline to all that creative energy that you have.
It's movement.
It's movement. Okay.
It's movement. It moves energy.
It's
Energy.
true. It's true. All right. So, you know, I'm always saying that I feel like I'm standing at the intersection of people, environment, and economy, and over and over and over again, we're confronted with this binary choice. Do we, develop or protect? And I think that that's a binary answer to a non-binary opportunity. And I think we could use story to balance or find symmetry between those three big systems. So, I think that there are many opportunities where we can design a development project in a certain way that complements our natural capital, or we can derive economic benefit by protecting a natural element out there. Can you talked about story as an ecosystem. Can you elaborate on that idea a bit?
Well, it's funny because just hearing those words develop and protect, like it makes me say, well, can't we develop to protect? Like what's
Yes,
preventing us from developing to protect?
we
You
can.
know? So there is this middle way, I suppose. In terms of an ecosystem, I kind of, because of some discussions you and I have had recently, I started thinking of story in terms of an ecosystem and how, ecosystems have feedback loops and there's energy exchanges and there's a sustainability that should occur, right? And I was just thinking about how stories could potentially operate in much the same way, because really brands are nothing but a collection of stories. That's what your brand is. It's a collection of all your stories. Your personal brand is the collection of all your stories. I'll call it your personal or corporate mythology, right? Like we just have these collections of stories that sort of make up and stand for what we represent.
Yeah.
And they're a mishmash. There's some that the ones that we choose to share potentially are the ones that make up our brand, but there's a whole bunch of other ones that happen to us that we don't always share. And so we're constantly sort of pruning to some degree to maintain an image. But knowing that all of us have these different stories in our histories that aren't all, glossy and finished and shined up for the public, like there's something about the commonality of all that that, yeah, I don't really know where I'm going with this, but
Well, it seems like, where I'm following you is that this is about authenticity.
mm-hmm.
And so you see a guy like Barry trying to use the internet to connect cool people that he knows with other cool people. And then you see him struggling on the knife edge of technology, no sound, delays, right? So it's but it's real,
It's
and,
real. And yeah,
and that so if nothing else, you I am. I'm not an Instagram feed.
well, and also this idea that, you know, if we go back to like what you're saying is your sort of drama between, you know, do we protect or do we develop? The people who wish to protect and the people who wish to develop, there is a common point between them. If you
Right.
dig down deep enough into their backstories and into what fuels them and into what their values are, there is some point of connection that you can start at to get consensus. And from that initial point of connection, that is where it can then grow in a way that both parties feel as though they're being heard, they're being seen, that you're going to be listening to their concerns. And that's where the mediation can start to happen, so that we can find that point where maybe not both parties are particularly happy, but they can live with the results in a way that honors the other half of the party that's involved.
Yeah,
And
and it also represents a greater awareness. I think that, I mean, that's my mission is to unlock prosperity while caring for the earth. And I think that this conflict of feeling like it's a binary choice
right.
locked us down. We're missing out. We're
Yeah.
missing out on good jobs, but we're also missing out on time on the land to connect with nature. And so if we can rethink it, if we could tell a different story of this outcome, then I think there's power in that, and we can find it. And I think one of the ways that, from a cumulative effects perspective, that I really see story being so useful, at least in the work that I'm doing, and I'm working on this, is to be able to paint a picture of what it could be with the people in the room co-creating with you,
Mm-hmm.
and and with what I've experienced in the past. If you're vulnerable and open to learning first and exploring, the story that emerges is one that does come from all sides,
Mm-hmm.
and is usually a novel outcome that we hadn't thought of before, that actually finds the balance.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to be willing, you got to be able to weaken a little bit, to be able to go there and find that sacred ground. And I just think story is such a beautiful way to go there.
Yeah. For so long we always talk about telling stories. Telling stories. But the other side of that is, for every story that's told, there's someone listening to it. And
Yeah.
I think if we put a little bit more emphasis on the listening instead of the telling, yeah, we can reach these places where we can then move from telling stories to listening to stories to actually building and creating stories that serve everyone and the planet. And
Well,
I think that's, when you talk to me about your work, that's where it wants to live, right?
yeah. So I'm trying to craft the story where we make our economy, we mature our economy from drawers of water and hewers of wood to a higher level, where we use our knowledge to be able to generate wealth while regenerating the natural capital that we're using to get there. And if we close that circle, I think that's how we're gonna do it. So we got to keep striving to that and keep telling that story. As you tell me, tell it as if it is,
Mm-hmm.
and then let everybody figure out how to get there. They will, if
Mm-hmm.
they have that vision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speak it into being.
So let's go into the CFX library here for a minute and talk about another great story. And every week, I ask the guest to share a link to a reference, whether it's a scientific paper or a novel or a video or whatever it is, where people who are interested in this could go beyond our show, and have a look. So, Mary, what are you recommending for people this week?
Well, I'm sure everybody's maybe thinking that I'm going to recommend a book about story, sort of a how-to book. I get that question a lot from so many people. What's the best storybook if I want to go tell better stories? And I never really recommend one sort of book that teaches how to tell stories. So the book that I'm going to share as my resource is a novel, actually. It's called The Overstory, and it is a beautiful novel. I have not recommended this to anyone who did not just like love it and rave about it themselves. I believe it won the Pulitzer Prize. I read it sort of long before that. But it is a beautiful story. And since so many of your viewers do have an interest in the environment, it sort of combines this idea of environment and story into one beautifully told tale that I think will be read for many, many years to come. So that's the book I'm recommending.
Right. So I put a picture of it up there. Richard Powers. I'll put a link below our video if people want to go directly to it. I'll find it for you and put a link there. I'll be full disclosure, I haven't read it, so I'm excited. Mary's actually been filling my bookshelf with all kinds of great ideas. That's the power of connection and seeing things through another person's eyes is, I feel like I've read a lot of stuff and then I find out I really haven't read very much, but this one really intrigues me. It's like, as you can see in the cover that I've got up on the screen, it's the redwoods and the sequoias. And that's where the novel sets its stage. And I talked earlier about Karen's and my experience of decompressing in Muir Woods and the energy of those great giants. It's going to be a terrific read. And thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm. My pleasure.
Yeah. So we're drawing to a close here, Mary. It's been kind of a wild ride this morning.
It has been.
But that's what makes it exciting. And I we could pre-record these things and have it all perfect. But another great song that from the Tragically Hip, one of the lines is, "There's no dress rehearsal. This is our life." And so you just do it and live it. And so I appreciate your patience and tolerance, Mary. Also, huge gratitude to FSD 28. One day I'm going to figure out who that is. I think I might know, but they're being quite shy about it. Mm-hmm. But we wouldn't have known that nobody was hearing you had they not connected and helped us with that. So thank you. I invite you to connect with Mary directly. Go to her website at www.marykincaid.com. And I showed you the link to her songs page as well. I also invite you to go to my page, barryjwilson.com, and click on the Stories tab. There's a bunch of stuff in there. I think you'll like it. My last ask is relating to sending another ripple out there, Mary, and that it's this idea of hitting subscribe and that little bell on YouTube. And here's the cumulative effect of that. It's actually your actions of one individual person can actually move the algorithm over at YouTube. So the algorithm is sitting there listening to everybody. And if you hit subscribe, it goes, "Oh, they like that." And then if you hit the bell, it says, "Oh, they really like that." And two things happen. Then the algorithm says, I'm going to show them more stuff like this content. So you're going to get more perspectives. That's going to come up in your feed. And then secondly, it says, geez, maybe there's some other people out there that are going to be interested in, and it'll actually show it more. Otherwise, if we don't do that, it kind of hides it. So start sending some ripples out there. Help us connect with everybody. And, thanks so much, Mary. I'm just so grateful to be a student of yours, a colleague, a friend, and a fellow warrior. So thank you for sharing this time with me today and everybody else.
You're so welcome. It's been my pleasure. I feel the same way about you. It's been so wonderful working with you. And it was great to explore some of these things with you today.
I can't even imagine where we're going to go with this. It's going to be so exciting. So people just follow along. I have a feeling somewhere down the line, I'm going to really try hard to convince Mary to get come on again. And maybe by then we'll have a producer. All right. Have a great weekend. All right. So I think this will work. I sure hope so.
I hope so too. This is why people
Doesn't.
pre-record, right?
But live is so much more exciting.
Yeah, of course.
I don't know either.
It's not accessing my camera or my audio today. And there's nowhere for me to click. Like there's no like go into settings or.
Yeah. So I'll just pretend you're looking at it.
Yeah.
Use your
Use my imagination.
That's your superpower. I know that. So I'm not worried about that.